Hello, everybody. So, something that's kind of been quite prevalent in my life, um, something that I've had to sort of be a witness of, even like this weekend, and definitely for the last year more prominently, is sort of how me being on this, if you can kind of call it a spiritual path, sort of investing yourself in this kind of way. It affects your social life massively. Forgive the voice, got a bit of a cold, but I used to, even when I first picked up a spiritual book, it was for quite some time that my social habits changed dramatically. It has now, but even back then, I was drinking and going out every weekend and talking to the same people. And what's kind of started happening hugely recently is how I just don't fit into that environment anymore. Now, it's a little bit different where I live in Manchester, in England. Some of the places where I go, there's a certain mentality, and especially in the town where I live, it's very working class. So it's not a broad example, I don't think. It's probably a more extreme one. But what I found with the same people that I was spending time with, I no longer kind of fit into that environment. The kind of interactions that were going on and how I fit in and the kind of conversations that go on, it's very difficult and it's challenging because I see through it and I don't fit in, and I think it's a waste of time. I very rarely go out drinking anymore, but when I have done, it's not been enjoyable. Now, the thing is, what I've come to realise is, when you're on this kind of spiritual path, if you're committed to it, not everything else has to take a back step. Everything. I want to say everything. You can keep your job, of course, but what I mean is the normal social interactions and drinking and chasing members of the opposite sex relentlessly and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work in tow with this kind of way of life, in my view, because it's not. You're coming from a place of righteousness is kind of maybe not the best way of saying it, because it kind of sounds like you're being egotistical and putting above someone. But when you truly understand the true teachings of the great spiritual work and the religions in the basics, you realise that, drinking alcohol and talking crap every weekend and chasing women or whatever, it's all meaningless. It's not that you give it up because you feel you have to. It no longer matters. It no longer has any kind of relevance anymore. I have a group of friends. I still have them friends, but I just don't hang about with them as much. That I used to, spend time with at the weekend. And there's a bar literally on the estate where I live, and it's very close to where I live. So that was my social hub for a long time. And I very rarely go in there anymore. Now, I went in there the other night for the first time in a long time. Because my local sports team, we had quite a big victory. So I wanted a quick chat with one of the people that go in there, who I've been, watching that team with for a number of years. So I got in there and I had a bit of a chat with him, and he was a little bit drunk, but not too bad. So I was able to have a reasonable discussion with him about the match. And then another guy who was in there. This is just an example of the kind of the sort of, I say unconsciousness, and it is the behaviour that you kind of have to deal with in these situations. A guy that I think I've only seen once before, was quite highly intoxicated. It was probably about 10 at night, so, every people that had been there, probably been there a few hours. But this guy, from my apartment window, I can see quite a lot of the estate, and I know he lives a few doors away, but I don't know what that's got to do with anything. But anyway, I've seen him a couple of times, and I think I've seen him in that bar once before. He doesn't know who I am. And he was with some other people, and I was talking to my friend, and he kind of came over and kind of rudely interrupted us, really. We were having a conversation, and then suddenly he butts in. So, I tolerated it and let him carry on. There's no point, at the end of the day, you've got to appreciate when people are intoxicated, they don't behave how they necessarily would. So if you're in that kind of environment, you have to make allowances for it. But he came over, and he was calling me mate, some quite unpleasant things. Now, I actually had to look for a reaction in my friend. I was like, God, because he'll stand up for himself if he has to. But he just took it with a smile, and he was drunk, and it might have been. I personally wouldn't talk to somebody like that in even a joking manner, because it wasn't funny. He was making fun of his weight and calling him quite a nasty name. It's not something that, he said, you fat little, and then the C word, and I just don't think that kind of language is nice in any situation. Anyway, my mate didn't think out of it, and next minute he says to me, "Oh, what can I get you, mate?" or something along them lines, as if he was going to buy me a drink. And I didn't really think about the reasons why. I just didn't want to drink off him. I didn't want him to buy me a drink. And I said, but rather than say I don't want to drink off you because I know that is being rude, I just said I'm just having that one and then I'm going, so I'm okay. Because I had a drink already, which wasn't really. I'd probably had one more, to be honest, but I wasn't staying in that long. So I said that, and then he looked at me as though I just told him that I'd called his mother, a prostitute or something extreme like that. He looked at me with disgust. His eyes were frowning. He became angry, looked at me, and then looked away. And I'm thinking, what a strange situation that was. So, and then a few minutes later, he came and grabbed hold of me, which I found quite uncomfortable, actually. Like, grabbed hold of me by the shoulders. I can't even remember what he said, and I know what kind of behaviour that is. It's kind of like he feels disrespected because I didn't want a drink off him. And this sounds petty as I'm saying this in a video about spirituality, but of course these are kind of the things that you have to deal with. And because my life is changing, it's kind of these are the petty, ridiculous situations I have to find myself in. And I thought, what a bizarre situation. I'm talking to a friend, someone interrupts, who I don't know, offers to buy me a drink and I refuse, and then I'm the bad guy and he tries intimidating me. And I'm thinking, what? And that just kind of highlighted to me how I don't fit into that environment anymore. And there's a lot of problems with that, because, well, not a lot of problems, there's none really if you deal with it correctly, but it also, for somebody like me, there's the opportunity there for my ego to slip in through the back door and go, I'm superior to you because I don't deal with this kind of stuff, and you're reacting that way, so I'm better than you. Of course, you can't do that. The ego's very clever. It'll come in through the back door and make yourself more important because you believe yourself to be spiritual. I see it all the time. Like, I'm part of a lot of groups on Facebook, like Eckhart Tolle groups, where spiritual passages will come up. So when I'm flicking through my Facebook page, which I have an addiction I have to try and master, I'm getting better at it, rather than seeing what people are having for the dinner, I'm getting quotes from Eckhart Tolle, so it can be quite inspirational. But I've noticed a lot of people in that group, and this is just an observation rather than judgments, because I don't know those people, but I think some of them take it a bit too seriously, because I've clicked on some people's profiles, and their main profile picture will be that of a flower, and then light in the background, and then the background picture will be light and spirituality and love and happiness, and everything that they do is like in relation to the love and light. And I'm thinking, well, that's beautiful, but it seems that that's an impression is that it seems that's overtaking your life, rather than you living a sincere life and carrying on and trying to adapt spirituality within it, that's taking you over and become an ego. It's become a concept in the mind of I'm spiritual, so therefore I'm great. And you have to be so careful with that. You have to, well, I think once you understand what the ego is and you fully understand the mechanics of it, you can recognise when your ego tries to do that. And I, even now as I'm talking about that person that I had that encounter with, I have to be careful because, well, from one perspective, I'm above the way he's behaving. I don't mean I'm a superior person. In fact, the opposite may be true because, well, the opposite isn't true. I'm neither superior nor inferior. We're all human beings. But the thing is, what led me on the spiritual path is because I fucked up more than most people have. And I had no choice but kind of go down this road. Otherwise, it would have been permanent suffering. So really, someone who isn't on the path that I'm on hasn't failed as much as what I have in life. I've made so many errors you wouldn't believe. So I never think that I'm superior to someone, but what I do think is all that behaviour that I used to be. You see, what would have probably happened a few years ago, I would have just got a drink off that guy and just said, yeah, I'll have that. I don't like... You see, the problem is with what he's trying to do there, he's not doing it like consciously, but subconsciously people like that are trying to buy friends. It's like quite a primal master hippo kind of mentality where, I'm the master hippo and you can come into my pond and I'll get you a drink and I'll suck you in so you can become part of my group, like a clique. So then he's got you. You know what I mean? And then you owe him a drink. So you're in his you're in his debt. And he will call upon that whenever he feels it's necessary to. If he's losing an argument or he feels like he's been disrespected, he can bring that up in conversation. I bought you a drink that time. I've offered you to speak to my friends. I invited you into my little circle. And of course, that's the kind of mentality of a lot of people. This is like, I don't know what it's like in the US and other countries, but that's very much what it's like in England, especially where I'm from. You have little cliques, and you have it at work, don't you? You have little groups of people who stick together. It's a common thing, people. We're social creatures. We have our little social groups. We stick to them, and when you have that, unconsciousness sets in. It's ego mentality. Ego operates on a singular level and also like a collective one. And in an environment like the one I'm explaining, in bars where alcohol is drunk often, the amount of unconsciousness is staggering. I mean, that's just a small example. But it's like, well, like I said, I probably should, there's no way of dealing with that. You're never going to come out. I tried to be as polite as possible in refusing the drink, and it didn't work. So you have to behave a certain way to appease people. You've always got to be mindful that you're going to upset people, and not everybody's like that in that environment. But it's interesting that happened, because what I've found as well is when I've been on this path, these challenges keep occurring. These little incidents keep happening. Now, a lot of the time I'm not handling it like I should do. So it's a lesson for me. I've got to accept that that's the level where people are at, and that's just the way they are, and separate myself from that as well. But also, you have got to stand up for yourself. Over the last few years, there's been some quite unpleasant encounters I've had in that place. Some that have never, but could have escalated to violence, because it's absolutely crazy when you get down to the basics of it. It's a very petty, primal kind of mentality that a lot of people still cling to. I'm part of a group, and if you're different to me or you do things that I don't agree with, I'm gonna, potentially get violent. And if you get down to the very basics of it, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, alcohol is something that is in England. It's responsible for virtually every kind of bad thing that goes on. You know, the NHS, the National Health Service, is overrun and decrepit because the amount of people that go in on Friday, at the weekend, Saturday nights, and just overflow it with alcohol-related mishaps, whether it be illnesses or accidents through alcohol, fights. It's absolutely massive. I'm sure it's the same in other countries, but in England, we're kind of renowned for being like the football hooligan type that drinks, and it's kind of true. It's kind of not very, you know, you don't feel very proud to be English when you think about that mentality. So my kind of social environment and life has kind of changed. I'm feeling a bit more isolated now because the people that I used to circle with, I kind of don't get on with them. It's not that I don't get on, but I can't relate to them like I used to. The kind of conversations they engage with. It's like my friend who was in the bar the other night. I'd literally not been in there for a few minutes after we were talking about the sport. And all of a sudden, he lays this on me and goes, "Andy, I've got cancer." And he didn't actually have cancer in the term that you might refer to it as. He had a little growth on his face that he has to have taken off, which is cancerous, but it's in the very early stages, and the chances of any massive complications are ridiculously slim. Now, of course, that's something that he's going through, and you have to be empathetic towards that. And from a perspective, you might be thinking, "Oh, hang on, someone's told you that, and you're dissing it." I'm not really dissing it, but if you think about that kind of environment, what people do. He threw a shock tactic at me. "I've got cancer." Now, that word invokes so much emotion in people's lives, and it will make him then the victim and me to wallow in empathy and show him compassion, and then he can play the victim role. So that's what he wanted me to do, and of course I had to convey understanding. And at the end of the day, I wish him no harm whatsoever. At heart, he's actually a really decent guy. But to sort of throw that at me, straight away, when it's not really the case, it shows a level of kind of attention. Someone who wants to this is a grown man who's got grandchildren. And I don't see him that often. And it's kind of interesting because, I'm not his best friend. But yet he feels like, he's drunk. It's Friday night. And he has to try and get sympathy and feel the victim. And get that off anyone that he can. And that's kind of... I mean, he's kind of one of those people that do that. He's one that you'll talk to him and try and have fun, and he'll start complaining about some meeting that he had at work that day. And bars are full of people like that, because what I found is some people who may live on their own or don't have a lot of friends or family or whatever, they'll go to a bar to offload their problems and will do that to anyone that'll listen. And you can understand that, because to offload a problem is to kind of half it if it's someone who cares, really, which is quite important. If you can, they say a problem shared is a problem halved, and it's very good to talk about things if it's done in the right way, if it's done in a therapeutic way, and in a conversation that's meaningful with someone who cares. If it isn't, it's just a quick release, and then half an hour later you'll need to offload that problem to someone else. But you have to be very careful, because what I found is you have to look after yourself. So these people who want to offload all their problems to you doesn't do you any good. You have to be selfish and realise that if you're listening to all these problems continuously, it's having an effect on you. Because as human beings, we all have point that we can get to before you can't take anymore. You can't continuously take other people's problems on board. People want to suck the life out of you. I did a video about energy vampires, and that's what you got a lot of in bars where alcohol's concerned, because alcohol will infuel it even more. And it will turn a minor problem sometimes into a major one. It'll turn, a little victim into a big victim. So you have to be selfish and walk away from those people, because although you can be empathetic, you can say, well, that's your issue to deal with, but you now are trying to suck the life out of me. You want me to be personally invested in your problems, and for me to show the same level of concern that you're feeling so that you can feel better, when really the way to deal with all problems like that, you need to turn inward. Of course you need the support of your friends and family, and we have a social element to us, but ultimately everything that you deal with, you have to deal with on your own. And true growth is done internally, not externally. And it's harder to do, which is why people turn to drink and these kind of environments, and it's the norm. And the world's set up that way. Go and buy drinks, go to the bar and see attractive girls behind the bar, and go and play pool and spend loads of money, and then the government get more money through tax, and then you feel ill, and then using the NHS more. It's a crazy situation that we're in. So it's kind of I kind of have to be careful at the minute how my social life is changing. It's like I went out last night for a few drinks with a friend of mine who happens to be an incredibly enlightened guy. So the conversations that we're having are actually meaningful, and he doesn't complain. He doesn't complain about this or that, or spend all night whinging, or it's just not. I just can't listen to it anymore. I have to be very selective about the people that I hang about with. I would sooner sit in on my own and read a book, or go to the cinema on my own, than spend time with someone who displays overtly unconscious behaviour. And like I said, you have to be careful that the ego doesn't slip in through the back door, but unconscious behaviour is unconscious behaviour, and that's not a judgment, that's a fact. You may be wrong in what you label as unconscious behaviour, but I would suggest, being drunk in a bar and talking nonsense is unconscious behaviour. We all, every now and again, have a little bit of what you might call a blowout, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, I suppose. But me and my mate were having this chat briefly last night, and I said, if you were totally 100% secure within yourself, and you reached a decent level of enlightenment, or you have become enlightened, drinking wouldn't be necessary at all. Socialising in that environment wouldn't be necessary at all. And he just went, what, you're right. And we looked around at all the people, and there were some really attractive girls in there. And I'm a bloke, and I'm a warm-blooded bloke. I can appreciate things like that. But you look around, and those girls, there was some really attractive girls, and they were dressed very provocatively, and they were loving the attention that they were getting from the males, and the males were all chasing after them, and it was all a little play. And it's like, oh God, how boring. And that's the way. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. That's Christ. It wasn't that long ago. I was doing that every weekend, not dressing provocatively for attention, but chasing the ones that were. And I had some great nights and some terrible nights, but ultimately, none of it was meaningful. Not one part of it. Not one part of it added anything to the essence of my life. Nothing. You know what? The best moment, one of the nicest moments and more meaningful moments in my life that I can ever remember, is being stood on a beach on my own in Thailand with some headphones on, listening to this new song written by Noel Gallagher that was a beautiful song. And I just had a moment of sort of peacefulness, and it was just beautiful. Them are the moments, and some moments that I've had with friends and family, and looking into someone's eyes and you see love and you appreciate it, and looking at a child when they're playing and things like that, not getting smashed and talking crap in bars. It really just, I never thought I'd be the kind of person that doesn't interest me anymore. It'd be interesting to know if anybody's got any kind of views on this. It may be that I've gone a little bit too far in dissing the situation, but I do think I'm onto summit with it. I'm going away for a week in Egypt soon, on my own. Solo travel. You know, last year I went on 3 or 4 holidays, all with different people. This year, I'm trying to justify the fact that I have got friends, but this time I'm going alone. To Egypt. My sort of plan, my usual act, I've done this 2 times before. And you know what? What fantastic times I had. I've only been away twice on my own to Egypt. Same kind of holidays in different places. And what I do is, you know, usually get like my mum to take me to the airport, or get on the train, or get a mate to drop me off, or whatever. Because it's kind of nice to have someone, you know, someone there when you're leaving. You just, and then, so I'll go to a place that's like an all-inclusive hotel that'll be on a coral reef, and then I can do the snorkeling and the diving, which is what I absolutely love. Just to appreciate nature in that way is just a beautiful thing, and it can. That's my plan. So I'll go to a nice place, get my own room where it'll have a decent social environment. And my plan is, I get up, I have breakfast, I snorkel for a couple of hours, have dinner, snorkel for a few more hours, have some main meal, and then have a numerous amount of drinks, socialise with people, and then that's it. And then that's my day repeated. Because you know that you've got the nature side of it, where you can appreciate, like on the coral reef where I'm going, it's amazing. It's on the Red Sea. There's just hundreds of different kinds of fish. It's as beautiful as you can imagine. One of the most beautiful things in the world. The turtles and dolphins, and it's just beautiful. Stingrays. It's just beautiful. And if you can, it's like you can really be present, because you're just appreciating nature, and there's nothing more beautiful. And you're just being present, and you're looking. And I'm not one of these that has to take cameras or name everything. I'm not interested in what they're called. Someone wants to tell me, that's fine. But if you're doing that, and then you try and label things, and you go, that's such a thing, and you're kind of missing what it is. You just look and appreciate, and that's all it's there for. It's the same with cameras. I don't mind taking the odd snap, but if you take too many, you're not being present anymore, because you're taking photographs rather than being present. So that'll be my holiday. And then at the night, there's the social situation. So I will be drinking. I never get totally, I never get drunk. It's a different kind of mentality on holiday, because everybody's in a better mood and there's less unconscious behaviour. And also, it's not a bar in Manchester where unconscious behaviour is rife. But still, it'll be challenging, because there'll be social interactions and social groups that I have to try and manage. So there will be a challenging aspect to it. So maybe I can, maybe there'll be some more stories. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Could you sort of, if you can, make any comments that you think, any experiences that you've had, and your sort of drinking habits? Do you drink at all? Yeah, I drink once every 2 weeks now, and that's it. And just very briefly, even though this is kind of about drinking, not really spoke about why I think it's so sought after. It's because alcohol slows your mind, doesn't it? And I used to do it when I went through a bad time. I used to try and solve my problem through drinking, because the mind slowed down and my problems didn't seem as bad anymore. And I drunk, and it seemed to help. And of course, that's why people drink, because life is very, very challenging and complicated these days. And if people drink, it doesn't seem as bad because your mind isn't going a mile a minute. But the negative side effects of that is unconscious behaviour and mixing in unconscious circles. And some people use alcohol for extreme reasons. You know, they'll just that's their life. It revolves around it, and I just don't think that's. I know that's not the way to be. You're not going to reach enlightenment by getting drunk every night, and it is the only thing that matters. I'd be really interested to hear your views, guys, and I'll speak to you later.